Hello and welcome to the Juan podcast. If you're enjoying the show, consider signing up for the Patreon. There you get ad-free content, early access, exclusive episodes, and monthly supporter hangouts. You can find it at patreon.com/the Juan podcast. If you don't like the subscription-based models, there are other ways of supporting the show that are linked in the description. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy this episode.
They said it was forbidden. They said it was dangerous. They were right. Introducing the paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual. Dive into the arcane, into the hidden corners of the occult. This isn't just a comic. It's a hidden tome of supernatural power. All original artwork illustrating the groundbreaking research of Juan Ayala, one of the only living homunculologists of our time. Learn how to summon your own homunculus, an enigma wrapped in the fabric of reality itself, their power at your fingertips, their existence, your secret. Explore the mysteries of the Aristotelian, the spiritual, the Paracelsian, the Crowleyan homunculus, ancient knowledge lost to time, now unearthed in this forbidden tale. This comic book holds truths not meant for the light of day, knowledge that was buried, feared, and shunned. Are you ready to uncover the hidden? The Paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual, not for the faint of heart. Available now from Paranoid American. Get your copy at tjojp.com or paranoidamerican.com today.
Welcome to the One-on-One podcast with your host, Juan Ayala.
We catch a lot of flack for talking about it sometimes, but most of I can't say all because there might have been a few, but a lot of the areas where we find heavy amounts of like cryptid reports or like cryptid activity, we also find evidence of occult activity that takes place in those same woods. And it's weird because a lot of people that live in like 21st century, American cities, and they don't spend a lot of time outdoors or in like non-urban environments. The idea that there are people out in these unpopulated or very sparsely populated areas engaged in like ritual occult activity, that seems crazy to them. They think that's impossible in 21st century America, but it happens. And it doesn't just happen in the Southern Appalachians. We talk to people out of the Pacific Northwest or in Florida that also run across this evidence of occult activity.
And what's funny is we know people that do strictly Bigfoot stuff, and they'll go out. A friend of ours went out to the swamps in Florida, and he was doing strictly, skunk ape stuff out in Florida, and he ran across all these people doing rituals, these sigils made of sticks hanging from the trees. Mm-hmm. He ran into all kinds of crazy stuff. We've actually run into a lot of really strange occult activity in an area where we've been doing research for many years now in North Georgia. And our channel and our videos were taking kind of a dark turn because we were going to this place over and over again, and we were finding more and more evidence of rituals taking place deep in the woods and all the stuff that kind of came along with it. But we weren't really going out there for the occult necessarily. We were finding evidence of cryptid activity in these same areas where this occult activity was taking place.
Welcome back to another episode of the One-on-One podcast. Your host, as always, make sure to follow the show at the One-on-One podcast on all social media platforms, tjojp.com, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff, links down below. And today I am joined by Hellbent Holler. How you all doing today?
We are well.
Doing great.
Can you guys plug your stuff before we get started and where people can find you if they're interested in cryptids, interested in out in the field research, and also you guys have a podcast as well?
Yeah, so you can find us on YouTube. Just look up Hellbent Holler. It's youtube.com/Hellbent Holler. You can find me on Instagram at Hellbent Jessi. I'm more active on there than Joe is, but we put all of our investigations on YouTube as of right now. But we're a field investigation team, but everything's on YouTube. You can check out all of our videos. We have a ton up there. We've been doing this for a couple of years.
And how does one get started as far as getting the itch to go out and hunt for these cryptids? Because I've talked about Dogman before, Bigfoot and all that stuff, and you guys are running towards portals and really putting yourself in danger's way. What got you guys started as far as wanting to go out and actually start doing this? Because one thing is reading about it, because I get made fun of all the time being an armchair occultist. One thing is reading about it and talking about it, and another thing is actually doing the do.
Yeah, you got to be out there casting them spells, boy. But so Joe and I kind of started differently. He was more interested in the physical cryptid kind of thing. I was more interested in the occult, ghosts and the paranormal. So that was kind of where we came from in terms of our interests. And we both lived in New Orleans for a long time, and that's where we met. And we moved back up to the Southern Appalachian region. I'm originally from Western North Carolina, in Haywood County, and he's originally from Virginia. So we moved back up to the Southern Appalachian region, and we just started hiking a lot when we got up here because we lived in New Orleans for so long. We were just in the city all the time, and didn't do much outdoorsy type stuff while we were there. But we moved up here, we started hiking a lot, and we actually started just listening to podcasts, and we decided to go legend tripping. We still both had an interest in cryptids and the paranormal, and we did kind of like you said, the armchair research kind of stuff. And we went out where this guy he had this experience where he saw like a shape-shifting witch. And we were like, oh, we know where that is. So we went and hiked the trail, went out there, and a bunch of crazy stuff happened. And so at that point, we decided we can either go forward with this and really pursue this and go head first into it, or we can just never go back in the woods again. So we got a cheap camera off Amazon warehouse and started just going head first into it. We started filming our expeditions, going to different areas where there was different activity going on, filming it. And I taught myself how to do video editing and put all this stuff together. I started the YouTube channel and started putting all of our stuff out there on the channel. And we started really, really just committing all of our time and resources and energy to pursuing this project, Hellbent Holler.
And you know that this is one of the things. I'm a skeptic like anybody else. Even when it comes to the occult, even when it comes to all this magic stuff, there's plenty of stories. There's plenty of things written down about it, but there's never, except for a handful of. I'm an evidence guy, right? Like I want to see this stuff. I want to see it in front of me. Like right now, the whole UFO, aliens, all of a sudden it's a government psyop, and I go, wait a minute. Obviously, from 1947 and on, Kenneth Grant, which I've heard you guys talk about, they claim responsibility for the modern UFO age. But what about before 1947? Was that all a government psyop? Was all that orchestrated? Was all that Project Bluebeam? Like, I don't think so. But again, this is part of the community. But you guys are putting in all this time and going out to the woods and filming. Does it get a little bit discouraging where you don't sometimes always get like some evidence? Like what would be the smoking gun for you guys to be like, okay, this is real? If you were to see, all right, so you have the portal in the in the far or whatever, you're running towards it and the portal's still open. Are you going to jump through it? What are you going to do when you actually, you know what I'm saying? Like what? I
know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, one of us might end up like halfway through the portal. Well, just be like a dangling leg or something.
If you've watched that video that what did you call it? A burning light?
Yeah.
You put it up? We experienced what could have possibly been a portal opening up in the mountains of North Georgia. It was like the craziest thing I've ever seen. She literally tried to run towards it, and I had to stop her because I'm a foot taller than she is, so I had a better vantage, or at least a different vantage from it, and I could see what looked to be little figures moving around it. So that's where all of a sudden I'm going, are those people? Are those something else? We're in an unfamiliar part of the woods. It's the middle of the night. I don't think we should be gallivanting towards it because we don't know what the heck it is. Mm-hmm. But as far as like the smoking gun goes, we've gotten some pretty cool stuff. I mean, we've gotten like a really interesting thermal hit. We got some thermal images from the Land Between the Lakes, the LBL, of what
appears to be a dogman.
A dogman. We can't debunk it with anything else so far. and we've gotten other stuff. But as far as like that smoking gun, I don't know.
I think, that's where the problem comes in is I would love to, I've never had like a one-on-one sighting, what would be like considered a Class A sighting of either a Sasquatch or a dogman or anything like that. I've never had a sighting like that. I'd love to experience that. That's what I'm going out there. That's what I'm going out there for. But even if I had that kind of sighting and I had my camera at the ready and I had the presence of mind to film this, the way things are right now, like you said, the whole aliens thing, is it a government psyop? Is it real? Is it a psyop? I mean, somebody would see the video that I captured and that there would be so many people who'd be like, oh, that's AI, that's fake. So I don't think even if you had a smoking gun, if you presented the world with a smoking gun, it would not be considered that at all, just because everything can be faked to the level it is right now that everybody would just not believe it, So no matter what you did or what you captured, it would just, nobody would believe it.
Because the Patterson film, some people say that's faked. Some people say that was a suit the whole time, but then obviously it's got all the anatomy kind of correct, or there's some things there that you'd have to really think it through, like, put breast on this whole thing and then make the costume with that, right? So it's kind of, but my whole thing has always been like, okay, if there is this thing out there, I think we would have caught more of it by now. You know what I mean? Unless it's not fully flesh and blood, right? And it's more
okay. So now let's get into this here, because I know a lot of your audience isn't super cryptid people. So we'll get into this right here. There are different camps when it comes to something like Sasquatch. You've got what you would consider the apers. We call them apers. These are people who think that this is a monkey running through the woods. And then you have people that they refer to as the woo people, who they think that this is some sort of supernatural being. I think most of the time we fall in both camps in a way, that we do think it's flesh and blood, but we also think it seems to have supernatural abilities.
I mean, I started out just completely in like the flesh and blood camp. I mean, I could have sat here and talked to you about Gigantopithecus, and possibly it came across like a land bridge, across the Bering Sea and the fossil record and everything like that. But the longer we've done this and the more witnesses that we've spoken to that we find credible, and the more experiences we've had in the field, I think that some of these things, they exhibit qualities that you would expect from like a flesh and blood creature. You see them eating. There's reported scat piles found. They leave trace on the environment, like footprints, which are probably the most well-known example of that. But you're right. If it was a breeding population of giant apes in North America, at this point, you would think we would have something on it.
Yeah, some physical specimen of some kind.
And a lot of these like skeptics' arguments, they carry some weight, man. Where's the body? And you start hearing these like crazy like explanations. Well, they eat their dead. They do this. They bury their dead. And I'm just like, so they've never missed like one? I mean, they've got 100% success rate with this track record.
They're really good Sasquatch cannibals.
Yeah. So to me, the only explanation is that if they are flesh and blood creatures, they're flesh and blood creatures from somewhere else. They come from somewhere else. They're here for a while. They do their thing, and then they're back to wherever they were going to. Whether that's like an interdimensional thing or some sort of like crypto-terrestrial. Maybe some people say from the underground. Those possibilities make more sense to me than the fact that it's just an ape and it's normal, but we just can't catch it, and it's just in the woods all the time, and it's just really good at hiding. That doesn't make sense to me. And I think the fact that we've approached the phenomenon for the most part in those terms, like, it's a zoological pursuit. You're trying to capture an unknown species and prove it to science. I think that's why there hasn't really been any movement on it since the Patterson-Gimlin film, since the fact, and decade after decade of people out trying to catch basically what amounts to a large monkey in the woods. And I think that if it was a large monkey in the woods, we would have caught it by now. The only way that, you always hear about a government cover-up and the fact that there's this government cover-up going on. And I'm going, well, why invest that much time and money and effort decade after decade to cover up what is basically a large monkey in the woods? The more time you spend doing this, if you're honest with yourself and you're not afraid to put yourself out there with some ridicule, because Bigfoot community is pretty rough on people who kind of stray off the status quo. But if you're honest with yourself, you've got to go, there's something more going on than just a monkey in the woods.
It's not a freaking monkey in the woods.
I'm not saying they get out of UFOs. I'm not saying they come out of portals. I don't know. I know that they do leave physical trace on the environment. People do see them doing things like I mentioned before, like eating berries. You've heard about them hunting deer and killing deer and all of that. But
they also display some characteristics of something that's not quite a normal, like terrestrial animal. Like they have self-illuminating eyes. People report like mind speak, where they're communicating with people telepathically in the woods.
Well, that's what I just wrote down here, telepathic Bigfoot, because I've heard stories of the, I don't know if you guys have heard, I forget the guy's name, but supposedly he's got him in his scopes, and then he hears, I think, the big dogman talk, and then the Bigfoot's like, no, leave him alone, he's not gonna. And it's it's like, it sounds ridiculous, right? Can you imagine that?
A lot of this sounds ridiculous, and that's the thing is that you look at when the public thinks of like Bigfoot, you think of like the Harry and the Hendersons type thing, right? You just think of like a big 7-8 foot tall, basically a gorilla walking around in the woods. And those wilder stories, a lot of people go, well, that's interesting, but that's too crazy to be true, but you keep hearing stuff like that, like over and over and over again. The weirder stuff, like Jessi mentioned, you always hear them about having like self-illuminating eyes. We've seen something that might have possibly been self-illuminating eyes, 2 points of light that were lit up that moved like you would expect eyes and a head to move. There's no other light source. I mean, it was just in sheer darkness. Well, that's not a natural creature, man, but that seems to be happening. And it's weird because, the people that want to hold on to that, it's an ape in the woods theory, they start grasping at straws at that point, and they start.
It's that meme of that woman with the math,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the mental gymnastics that people have to go through to try to fit it into this box, that it's just this monkey running through the woods. And it's just that when they start to explain it and they're like, oh, well, it has this and this and it does this. That's crazier than if this was an interdimensional creature. They start talking about like, well, there's sea creatures and insects that have bioluminescence. And I'm going, yeah, but I mean, even if it was a mammal, your eyes are photoreceptors. Your eyes gather light and, transform that in your brain to your vision. Having those organs like exude light, it's kind of counterproductive as far as that's a weird evolutionary trait, or it's a weird biological trait you would expect. It's just, but you see that a lot of times. People will start to, like with the mind speak thing, you hear all sorts of stuff from like infrasound to just, you hear more like exotic stuff like quantum entanglement and like, you get into quantum mechanics reasons and all of that. But you know what? Here's the deal. We've never experienced mind speak, but we've talked to some extremely credible people who swear up and down that they have.
Yeah, don't appear to be crazy.
Yeah.
They're very believable that have experienced that stuff. And, a lot of that stuff kind of doesn't make its way to the public eye because, the community, the population at large is in love with this idea of a big ape in the woods. And it's a little uncomfortable when you start realizing that, maybe it's something that appears to be an ape in the woods, but it's not. It's
something much more and often much scarier. There's this really hokey kind of view of Bigfoot. You've got the Bigfoot stuffed animals and the tea towels and stuff. I think that the Sasquatch and Bigfoot is something that is much, much more frightening and possibly nefarious than what people really seem to think it is. And they really project this like Disneyfication onto a lot of these cryptids in general. These are creatures that are giant, and there's often just terrifying stories about them attacking people. That they're terrifying. They're just a terrifying creature. You're actually going out in the woods looking for a 9 foot tall, giant bipedal creature. If you don't go armed, what are you doing? You don't really believe this thing.
Would you shoot Bigfoot?
If we were threatened,
so.
I mean, if we just saw one,
I wouldn't just shoot one willy nilly. Yeah. You don't know the ramifications of something like that.
And there's no real upside for something like that because it's one of two. There's one of two reasons why. Well, there's three reasons technically. One of which is that everybody's like delusional and we're all just crazy. That's a possibility. But the other two things are that it's not a natural animal from this reality, this dimension, whatever you want to call it. You don't know what's going to happen when you shoot it. Or it is flesh and blood and it could be killed, in which case there's no body because there's a major cover up. Well, then all of a sudden that's into play at this point, you know.
You got PETA showing up.
Yeah,
you're the
You've
guy
seen
who
that
shot
guy on TikTok with the body. Have you seen that guy before? With the frozen.
Which one?
So let me look up this guy, frozen Bigfoot body. He's got, let's see here, because that's the thing, right? So we're talking about the interdimensional aspect of it. You also have the occult aspect, the illuminating eyes being something like Mothman. Dogman is also reported with that, and then the idea of the Gigantopithecus, which was an actual thing, right? And the idea that maybe, perhaps, let's think outside the box, it was able to survive for whatever reason and exist out in these cave systems, which we know that there are extensive cave systems in the, like Mammoth Cave system. They don't know where it ends. I mean, so the possibility, there's entire rainforests and entire ecosystems underneath the ground. I have a buddy of mine that lives in Vietnam, and you got that, I forget the name, it's like Dungong Cave or something, and it's like this entire rainforest underground. It's with animals that are only found there. So again, and it's like the I told my buddy recently, shout out to Joel, of the King Kong movie. I forget which, I think it's Kong versus Godzilla, the latest one, where they go into Hollow Earth, and it's all about Hollow Earth. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, and those myths, you know, I don't know if you can call them myths, but those stories, that's cross-cultural. Tons of cultures have stories of just a whole nother civilization, a whole nother biosphere underground. And, you know, one of the things we always talk about pretty much with any of these phenomena, you know, Bigfoot, Dogman, just like the UFO or the UAP phenomenon, I don't think there's just one answer that everything can kind of just be covered by.
Yeah.
I think some of it's experimental government crafts. Some of it might be physical, you know, alien craft from another planet. Some of it might be interdimensional. Some of it might be fourth dimensional, you know, beings kind of crossing into third dimensional space. There's a whole range of stuff. I think kind of Bigfoot kind of goes along those same lines. I think there might be more than one thing going on out there than, you know, what, maybe there is a relic population of just primates or hominids out there that big, but it is still or the, you know, the cause of some of these reported sightings, and then there's other stuff going on as well.
Wait, is this the guy? The
That's
dog?
Peter Kane, I think you're talking about.
Have you guys seen this?
Oh, this guy's been making videos for years.
Yeah, he's got some pretty what is his name, man?
He's like a fake dog trainer.
Yeah, he's a actually he's a real dog trainer.
Oh, he's a real dog trainer.
And then he's got the Bigfoot stuff. But yeah, that's Peter Kane, man.
He like talks about Bigfoot molesting him.
Yeah, he's got some crazy stuff, man.
So is this guy trolling people or what?
Oh yeah, it's a multi-year troll. He got pregnant by a Bigfoot one time.
Yeah.
It's real. It's some of it's more tongue in cheek than others, but if you watch him long, that's the guy. Yeah. He's been doing this Bigfoot stuff for years at this point, man. He had like frozen Bigfoot genitalia.
Yeah.
That he was going to try to like harvest.
Didn't he have like testicles? Or
yeah, he was going to try to
testicles?
He was going to try to harvest semen out of them to try to see if he could do like a test tube Bigfoot or something like that at one point.
But here's the thing about this, because it's the giant of Kaldahar. What's the name of the Kalahari? I think it is.
Yeah.
Where it's like these red-haired giants, which that's a really interesting story because, again, it goes back to this biblical time of the description of the Nephilim and the Elohim and all these different things, which are kind of sort of demi-demons, demigods, kind of, right? They're divine to some extent, right? And I think that's
God's
what... Yeah, exactly. Gods with a little G. And I think this is what we're seeing. And right, you have Moorhead with the Sierra sounds, and I think that a friend of mine and I did this episode where we related that to the barbarous words, which the barbarous words are supposed to be these words that are supposed to put you in this altered state of consciousness in order to summon things for. It's like, well, what if they stumbled across some sort of ritual that they were doing out there, invoking these things into our dimension? Because I mean, I've heard stories about that too. And when I tell people, they're like, so all occultists are responsible for all cryptids. I go, no. What if it's a technology and they're able to bring some in, and maybe some of them just bleed through like Stranger Things, like out of nowhere, a rift will open up in the woods and the national parks and all these different places that are vast open lands. And I mean, you guys are from Louisiana, so you know how weird it gets in Louisiana. There's a lot of stories
like
there.
That all over the South, man. I mean, we catch a lot of flack for talking about it sometimes, but most of I can't say all because there might have been a few, but a lot of the areas where we find heavy amounts of like cryptid reports or like cryptid activity, we also find evidence of occult activity that takes place in those same woods. And it's weird because a lot of people that live in like 21st century, American cities, and they don't spend a lot of time outdoors or in like, non-urban environments. The idea that there are people out in these, unpopulated or very sparsely populated areas engaged in like ritual occult activity, that seems crazy to them. They think that's impossible in 21st century America, but it happens. And it doesn't just happen in the Southern Appalachians. We talk to people out of the Pacific Northwest or in Florida that also run across this evidence of occult activity.
And what's funny is we know people that do strictly Bigfoot stuff, and they'll go out. A friend of ours went out to the swamps in Florida, and he was doing strictly, skunk ape stuff out in Florida. And he ran across all these people doing rituals, these sigils made of sticks hanging from the trees. He ran into all kinds of crazy stuff. We've actually run into a lot of really strange occult activity in an area where we've been doing research for many years now in North Georgia. And our channel and our videos were taking kind of a dark turn because we were going to this place over and over again, and we were finding more and more evidence of rituals taking place deep in the woods and all the stuff that kind of came along with it. But we weren't really going out there for the occult necessarily. We were finding evidence of cryptid activity in these same areas where this occult activity was taking place.
And I don't think in terms like that. Jessi came from like a paranormal kind of occult background. I didn't. So I don't think in terms like that. But, and you're out there and you're trying to look for other possible explanations for it. Well, then we're hearing like witness accounts of them running into people in robes, doing rituals in the woods. And these are in the same areas where we're catching weird sounds at night, like weird howls, weird like clicking speech, all sorts of like weird stuff. We're catching like disembodied eyes on our night vision cameras, weird flashes of light coming out of the ground, like balls of light flying around. And then you're running across like the human element of it. We're finding areas where it looks like occult activity is taking place. And finally it gets to the point where, if you're going to look at this logically, if you kind of look at this with no preconceived notions, I didn't previously believe in a lot of this stuff, but I can't deny what I'm finding at that point. And I'm just going, so now what's the connection if there is any? Is there this just like a weird kind of window area that just has like a weird energy or whatever? Are the veils between worlds thinner here? And the cryptid activity, the paranormal activity, and then the human occult activity are all separately drawn to this place?
Or are they feeding into each other?
Are they feeding into each other? Is one causing the other? But it takes place. It happens. I mean, you mentioned these sparsely populated areas. There are people out there involved in ritualistic behavior. It's been going on for generations, and it's undeniable. It's real. So
there's an area in North Georgia where we actually saw that portal. We've been going up there for a while. There is do you know what a wilderness therapy camp is?
Sounds like a cult.
It is. It pretty much is.
So kids who are misbehaving, usually it's pretty wealthy kids, or it's kids that nobody cares about and the state puts them in these. So these are wilderness therapy camps. It's where kids who are teenagers and kids are sent out into the woods and they're supposed to get back to nature. It can be anything from the kids are stealing cars or the kids have a video game addiction. It can run the gamut. And they'll put these kids out there and they're supposed to be taught survival skills and camping, and it's supposed to help them unplug and all. That's the brochure version of it. Turns out that a lot of these wilderness therapy camps, and actually Paris Hilton was sent to one in Provo, Utah. They're kind of like a cult. They take away these kids' clothes. They don't have tents or anything to sleep in. They make them sleep on the ground. They starve them. They abuse these kids. They make them go through basically just hell, and they abuse these kids out there. There is evidence, and we've gotten eyewitness reports from somebody. Let me back it up. I'll tell this story how we found this. We were out in this area in North Georgia, and we see these notes pinned to trees. It has a name, a very distinct name, and it says, "You can come home, you can come home." So the name's very distinct. I was like, what is this? So we're heading back out. As soon as I get signal, I Google the name. And I find this girl posting about her boyfriend. They were in high school. They were from, I think, Mississippi or Alabama. He was from a well-to-do family, and she got pregnant, and his family did not want them together. So his family basically kidnapped him and put him in one of these wilderness therapy camps. So she found out where he was being held. It was in this forest. So she went up there to try to get him and basically kidnap him back and deprogram him.
She went up there with actually a guy that does professional cult deprogramming.
Yeah.
Because the kid was over 18. He was still being held against his will, or he had been completely brainwashed at this point. So she went up there with people who were involved in...
who had been to these camps as kids and were now deprogrammers.
Yeah. So they were involved with like cult deprogramming, but not occult type stuff.
What the
So they're
heck?
out there trying to basically comb this wilderness. And these are just like city people. You know, these are city people out there trying to like go around in these woods and kind of come across these wilderness therapy camps with this plan on getting the boyfriend back out. And they start, it's weird because Jessi contacts this girl on Facebook when we're driving back in. Like I said, where we're at in the mountains up there, there's no cell signal for miles. So as soon as we kind of got back and we're driving through civilization again, Jessi's, in the passenger seat, messaging this girl going,
And you
hey,
talked to the actual girl.
Yeah, found her on Facebook. It's a very distinctive name, and went, hey, are you the girl that was leaving notes in this portion of North Georgia? And the girl was instant. She doesn't know what we do. Jessi's Facebook at that time was just very mundane. It didn't really make any mention of like Bigfoot or the paranormal or anything. And the girl instantly was just like, yes, did you hear the spirits of the woods up there? You need to be
just off the bat. Just did you hear the spirits of the woods?
Jessi's yelling, going, you won't believe what this girl's messaging me right now. And Jessi's like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, those woods are haunted. There's something going on up there. And then she proceeds to tell Jessi a story about how one of the guys who was the main cult deprogrammer, who had a lot of experience trying to get kids out of these programs where they, because eventually they're willing participants in it. They've been basically brainwashed at that point. And the guy tells a story about how he came across this clearing with a group of adults in like robes doing some sort of ritual with this crying child in the middle of it. And that he tried to break it up, but they got violent and he had to basically like run for his life out of there.
Yeah. And he described this clearing in this area, very in detail. We've been to that clearing several
instantly
times
where it was,
prior to us making this contact with these people. And I interviewed I've interviewed the guy and I interviewed the girl over the phone. But he described it in detail. We had been in this clearing where he ran across this ritual taking place, and we had been there several times. And what's weird is every time we've been there, we're like, one of us will turn to the other and say, I feel like something evil is here. I feel like one day we're going to come out here and there's going to be like a dead body out here.
Yeah. We've made that mention on several times on video that like, we just feel like we're going to walk around a turn in the path and all of a sudden there's just going to be a dead body. It's just
Is there a bloodstained altar by any chance out there?
No, but we found what appear to be bloodstains on the rocks up there.
There's broken women's jewelry,
bits of clothing that we found up. And this was all before we talked to these people.
We were finding that stuff before we even talked to these
people. So we eventually arranged a chance to interview and speak to both of them, and they kind of took us through it. And the guy is like going, listen, he goes, he's a cult deprogrammer. He's never really brushed up against the occult until this. And then he's going, I think that underneath all of this, that a lot of the people that are involved with this get involved with it because it's vulnerable children. They're in an isolated area. And he goes, a lot of them are involved in some sort of weird occult activity. And he goes, it's a perfect front for it. He goes, there's
apparently kids go missing out of these all the time.
And they just say, they ran away. You know what I'm saying? So, and then the kids are just never seen again. And he thought that, his words, that he thought that some of these kids were being ritualistically murdered up through there and then just hidden up, that they were. And he goes, he didn't know how far it extended, but he thought they had support from the top. And that we start kind of looking at that angle, and I'm going, well, you know what? There's so much human misery up in that area from the activities that are taking place that if some of this cryptid and paranormal stuff, if it's able to feed off of that energy, this is a perfect spot.
It's a feast at that point.
It's a feast at that point. And I'm going, maybe they're up there operating independently from this other phenomena that's going on, but maybe that other phenomena is being strengthened by it. And that's why we're having all of these experiences, seeing these weird lights. Maybe that's why the activity is so high up there. Maybe it's just somehow being strengthened by like the human activity that's going on up there at that point. Yeah, maybe that's the end goal of what the humans are doing. Maybe they're trying to strengthen this stuff.
They're trying to summon Cthulhu is what they're trying to do. And like,
exactly right. I mean, we've got one video where we leave Jessi alone in that clearing,
that particular clearing,
and we basically say, I'm going to leave you as bait, and I go continue up the side of the mountain. We're in touch via walkie-talkies. Well, she puts a night vision camera up on a tripod facing her. Well, you get these two lights that seem like their eyes. They move and they move joined together. They kind of seem like a head tilt, but comes up over her shoulder.
It's right behind you.
You can't see a body, but they behave just like eyes, and then they dip back off. And then she's sitting there and she closes her eyes and she's just, kind of basically talking. You see a light come out of the ground, it looks like, over her shoulder, just like really briefly. And it's not a flashlight beam. It's not a camping lantern. It's like that whole section of the woods just lights up for a second, appears like the light's coming from the ground, and then it just goes back out. She never saw it. We didn't realize it until we reviewed the footage.
Yeah, that happened when I tried to connect with whatever this entity was.
Yeah.
I closed my eyes and tried to connect with whatever was out there, and just that light emerges behind me. And that was just such a strange, right after that, we're hiking out of there, and we see this white wolf in the middle of the path, and we actually get it on camera. It's in the video. If you zoom in there, you can see the shine of its eyes.
Really weird, though. It's like
it was like
hunkered
angular,
low to the ground, and kind of angular and like very sickly looking, but moved extremely fast.
The solid white.
Yeah,
because so the idea of, I've heard it put before, elemental technology, so aligning certain, let's say certain rocks in a certain formation, we know that they do this. And then blood technology, where if you let the blood on the ground, it charges the area. And now you're touching on a part that's really interesting, because all these Wendigo stories are about what you have to give. You have to do a certain thing, right? A sacrifice, essentially, a ceremony, in order to become this creature, this demon, essentially, is what it is. Something, right? You transform into it, almost like a vampire or a werewolf. And then you're talking about, you saw like this sickly looking wolf. Could it have potentially been some sort of transformation? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't know. Like I said, it's you see that with the Navajo, with the skinwalker as well. It's one of the things. You have to murder like a family member. You have to do these acts that basically kill whatever little humanity these people have left at that point. And, it's weird, because when you first hear this stuff, we're into some weird stuff, obviously, but these people are telling us the story about how they think this occult is tied into this wilderness therapy camp, and there's children going missing and this and this. And I'm going, but if something like that was going on, this is a perfect front.
Because you have a constant stream of children coming in. Yeah. They're isolated. They're troubled kids, so you can say they ran away or something happened, because the woods are dangerous. Fell off a waterfall, anything like that.
And then the other thing too, is I started to think about is that there's a lot of wealthy parents that put their children in there, and I'm going, there's so many rumors of like a lot of these like wealthy families, these multi-generational wealthy families, they're tied into a lot of this stuff. And like you mentioned, sometimes you have to make that sacrifice in order to advance yourself in this, I don't know what the word would be, supernatural manner. And I'm going, so maybe the parents are kind of in on it to a certain extent. And even if they're not, maybe it's not the wealthy kids that are being sacrificed or going missing up there.
Maybe they're partaking in a ritual.
This is a perfect front for like human trafficking children.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Say you were to grab some kids off the streets of like Tucson, Arizona, and then send them to the mountains of North Georgia in a van. And these kids, most of them are drugged up by the time they get there, because they have behavioral problems. So they keep them, medicated. And then, when the medication wears off, if the kids are going, hey, I'm not supposed to be here, sure, this is just another crazy kid talking at this point. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. It's a perfect cover for it. And that ties in with what these people said was going on. The guy was going, there's kids going missing up there. He goes, one girl they claim supposedly drowned in a pool next to a waterfall. Remember that? And he was just going, I think she was killed in some sort of ritualistic manner. And this one they had to cover up to a certain extent. And it's when you start to kind of dig into it a little bit, I mean, there's obviously like a human trafficking network with children going on worldwide, you know? And it seemed like the more we learned about this particular thing in North Georgia, it seemed like none of it was like a bridge too far to cross. All of it kind of seemed plausible once we started digging into it.
And the more stuff we found out in the woods, we kept finding ritual sites in different areas. We were also finding children's clothing that was kind of ripped. And it was in very, very remote areas of the forest. We were finding these like triangles made out of limbs that were put together out there and stone circles.
And it's interesting because the triangle in Goetia, they use it to summon entities, which is really interesting. And obviously you stepped through I saw you guys step through the triangle. I know, big deal.
Well, that's not that far from where we saw that light anomaly, that burning light, that portal or whatever. And what's crazy is we went back to that area where we saw that burning light the next day, and we found these weird glyphs made with sticks on the ground, pretty much near where the light was at. If it wasn't exactly where it was right next to it. And in that area, like, we're very tech heavy in what we do. I always like say that we approach like really irrational topics as rational as possible. So we're up there with like Geiger counters, spectrum analyzers, tri-field meters, just all of this.
Because we're trying to get data on this too.
Maybe you can't like understand all of it, but maybe you can see points of commonality. Maybe you can see trends. Maybe you can see patterns. And we're up there and we're catching like weird stuff. We're catching like low-level residual radiation. We didn't catch much on the EMF detectors up there, but I caught some really weird like stuff on the spectrum analyzer that seemed anomalous at that time. Just some really weird stuff up there. But again, it's all right next to where these like weird stick glyphs are. And we've ran into those in several spots. Usually if we run into something weird in the woods, if you go there like a day later and you look around long enough, you're going to find one of these little stick patterns in the ground.
Yeah, it's the same symbol over and over again. And we've been finding the symbol in that area for, I want to say 5 years now.
And you'll see people.
And it's the same symbol that made out of sticks in all of these areas where we've had this really strange activity happen.
And you know, we'll have people comment on our videos and they're going, oh, that's the Sasquatch, that's the Bigfoot, these are the glyphs they're leaving. And I'm like, no, I don't think so, man. I think this is evidence of what the people up here are doing at this point. None of that screams like cryptid. You know,
it screams like it's a summoning. It's been a summoning ritual.
It screams a ritual to me up there.
And this is in the mountains, correct?
Oh, yeah. It's very, very remote part of the mountains up there. There's no real recreational type stuff available up there. There's a few small waterfalls, but they're hard as hell to get to. There's no camping.
There's not a lot of trails through there.
Not a lot of trails through there.
Some of that area is a wildlife management area. But
and we've seen one hunter up there who was shocked to see us, because he was a hunter, like in name only. He basically went up there to drink beer and get away from his wife. Yeah. And he was just like, I've never really seen anybody else up here before. And I'm going, well, you know, it's a hunting area. And he goes, yeah, it's a hunting area, but there's really no deer up here. And we're going, well, this is like a prime spot for deer, man. Most of this region's being overran with deer right now because areas are being clear cut. There's more food sources. The deer population's like exploding through here. And he's like, yeah, I don't really see a lot of deer around here, but I kind of like it that way. You know, and we're just like, well, have you ever seen anything weird up here before? And he'd had a few things where he thought he'd seen like large nests that seemed kind of odd to him, like ground nests. But he was like, I'm not up here after dark, though, you know. And he just goes, it's a little eerie up here after dark. And he's right, it's damn eerie up there after dark. So, and
the reason I asked if it's in the mountains because there is the magicians in the mountains. In Japan, there's a certain, during the 8th and 9th century, there was a mountain worshiping religion. And they thought that by ascending and descending these peaks, they would gain supernatural powers, become these sort of demons and shapeshifters. You have Crowley climbing mountains, right? He was a mountaineer. You have a lot of elites that like to climb. Everyone's, let's go to Mount Everest, right? There's a reason for that. And there are literally certain religions that they believe they would acquire actual powers from going up these mountains because they felt it was these places were closer to the sun. Some people think that the sun is a portal, so they think there was like some sort of supernatural metaphysical connection with the mountain itself. And I mean, I've been the strangest sign whenever you go to Gatlinburg, right before going into the Smokies, it tells you it's a Gatlinburg, a gateway to the Smokies. It's like what? Like, what are you saying? Like, it's like a portal? I'm opening up a portal. I'm sticking my head in?
And just ballparking, because we don't know. Again, we've never had that like face-to-face like Sasquatch encounter. We've seen what might have been a dogman on thermal. We've seen something in the LBL, some sort of like bipedal creature in the LBL that didn't really match up with the dogman, and that was extremely fleeting. We've seen that. I've seen it once. Jessi's seen it twice, but we've never had that. But we've had other stuff happen. We've caught weird light anomalies like for days, like on camera. We've caught like weird noises and everything like that, and it doesn't seem as if it's something that's here all the time. And that's part of the reason why we're going out really heavy on tech nowadays, is because I think that some of this stuff is interdimensional. Some of this stuff is like portal related. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, and I know that sounds like real new agey and everything, but at the same token, if you look at it just from a scientific, wormholes are definitely very scientifically possible at this point. A portal is basically just a small wormhole. A black hole is something that sucks in everything, even information. Well, a portal might be putting out stuff. It might be putting out different, gamma radiation, stuff on the electromagnetic spectrum and everything. And that's part of the reason why we go out so tech heavy. And I think that that's why you see a lot of these electromagnetic phenomenon in areas where there's like cryptid or paranormal stuff. I mean, we've had battery drain like you wouldn't believe. I mean, we've had equipment just go down only in certain areas and only at certain times, but it's repeatable.
There seems to be some sort of exchange of energy in these locations.
So, I mean, that's my working theory right now, is that there's some sort of, and it's got to be intelligently controlled, because you don't see these portals opening up in downtown Manhattan at like 3:00 on like a Friday afternoon. You know what I'm saying? They're only opening in certain places, and they're only opening in ways to try to at least
the observer effect.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things that we kind of look at, is we go out with this tech stuff. We don't know what it means, but it seems like there's some sort of pattern to it.
But it might make sense down the road. I mean, it's good to gather this data right now and get as much evidence and data as we can right now. And maybe down the road, we'll be digging through our notebooks and it'll make total sense for what this means.
So I talk a lot about alchemy on the podcast. And Paracelsus, one of the more influential alchemists, he would always talk about the nymphs, elementals, and these things that would, these entities that would exist in their realm, in their place, right? And you hear about these stories, how you're saying, all throughout different religions, different cultures. You hear about the similar concept, just with a different name, obviously, because it's going to have I've also heard it that it shows itself differently depending on what your culture influences, right? So
it depends on who's looking.
Yeah, that's a line from the Mothman prophecies.
What do you look like? It depends on who's looking.
Oh, really?
One of the elementals he had mentioned was the gnomes that were supposed to be representation of Earth.
Yeah.
In the areas that we go to in North Georgia, especially.
Oh, there's a history of
Cherokee little people.
Cherokee little people and fire-breathing, mountain-dwelling demons.
Yeah. So that whole like gnome elemental type aspect, so many cultures have stories of these little people that come out of the ground. They seem to be of the earth. And, we started finding like small footprints in the North Georgia mountains.
We've never found large footprints.
Yeah, and people would be like,
area.
well, they're like juvenile Sasquatch. And I'm like, well, where are the adults at? I mean,
it's like the latchkey kid, Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's like, it's like the Lost Boys type thing, but like the Bigfoot edition of it, a bunch of kids, no adults. I'm going, we're constantly finding these small footprints up here.
We're dealing with something else completely.
And then we start looking into it, and that area is just rife with stories of the Cherokee little people.
And where is this at, roughly?
What's that?
Where is this
North
at?
Georgia.
North Georgia. And this is not near Hellier. Hellier was near Kentucky, right?
No, Hellier's in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah, because that was
another story of small subterranean creatures that come out of the ground that are up to no good at this point. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I relate this to perhaps the missing 411, right? These open, vast areas. And I want to bring up here really quick that in the Britannica, they have, right, speaking of Crowley, a century later, a dazzling globe of electric fire appeared in the cottage where British occultist Aleister Crowley was staying, which he described in detail in his autobiography. He claimed that the floating orb instantly exploded, slightly shocking his hand. So you have Crowley talking about this orb lightning phenomenon, right? These orbs. I got a buddy of mine over in Utah with, he's got property that's adjacent to the Skinwalker Ranch, and he talks about these being chased down by these orbs, and that they can read your mind, they're telepathic, and they have some sort of so like I've also heard that these entities, even Bigfoot, they travel in this form. So it's like whenever you want to have somebody who's in a certain camp, like, oh, the occult isn't related to cryptids, or the cryptids isn't related to the occult, it's like, I think we're all talking about the same thing, just from a different perspective, because I believe that reality is holographic. So, depending if you're looking at it this way, a 4D thing that's coming in is going to look way different depending on which side you're looking at it from, we
don't even have a tiny bit of an idea of what's going on. I don't think anybody has even just a minuscule idea about what's really going on.
And the whole thing about it being different aspects of maybe like an overarching phenomenon. I mean, if it's not directly connected, it's related somehow, and it's just the fact that you mentioned the missing 411 stuff. You look at that, and I don't think there's any one particular cause for these mysterious disappearances, but it seems like there's a lot of different things out there that maybe behave in similar manners. One of the things that we always talk about is that you've got what are called Class B encounters, Class B Bigfoot encounters, and that's where somebody they think they've experienced or witnessed a Bigfoot, but they never saw them, but they saw associated stuff. They smelled a bad smell. They heard screaming. Things were thrown at them. If you were in a house and you weren't in the woods, you'd be calling an exorcist. You'd think that's poltergeist activity. But because it's occurring in the woods, ghosts happen in houses. If anything in the woods weird, it's associated with Bigfoot at that point. And I'm going, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that what you consider Sasquatch activity is as prevalent as what a lot of people think it is. But I think there's a lot of weird stuff in the woods.
So can I ask a question? Do you think that some of the stuff that's going on in North Georgia, where you have these wilderness therapy camps, what is the commonality here? You've got with Poltergeist and this activity that's going on.
Like children going through adolescence.
Children going through an adolescence. It's that energy. It's that puberty that really sparks up Poltergeist activity.
It's like The Exorcist.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that is feeding into this like wildergeist kind of thing, this poltergeist of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you start seeing root commonalities and all sorts of stuff like this. You start seeing a lot of, I mean, if you look at a lot of like Bigfoot like encounters that people describe to you, there's not a lot of difference between some of these Bigfoot encounters and a UFO encounter, even if no UFO was seen or anything like that, I saw it, it was there. It seemed to have some sort of strange, like physical effect on me. And then it was just gone. One of the things we talk about a lot is the concept of as above, so below. I mean, the American population is pretty accepting about the fact, and whether it's a psyop or not, but the American population is pretty accepting of the fact that there's weird stuff going on in the skies right now that can't be explained, that seems to behave in methods that, in manners that don't really mesh with our understanding of the physical universe. Well, there's equally weird stuff going on the ground as well. And, a lot of it doesn't seem to, you mentioned the Patterson-Gimlin film. I'm not sure what I think about the Patterson-Gimlin film. It doesn't really mesh.
You go back and forth on it.
I mean, when you talk to these witnesses, most of their encounters don't really match up with like the Patterson-Gimlin film. It looks kind of sloppy. It moves kind of slow, doesn't really care whether you see it or not.
Have you seen the stabilized version of that? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. It does not look like a suit, but it doesn't match up with most of what people describe. You always hear about blinding speed. It was there, then it was gone. That's certainly not what happened. The thing just saunters away kind of casually at this point. But it definitely, there's some sort of connection between all this stuff. But what it is, I have no clue. But there's definitely, maybe they're drawn to similar areas for, their own individual reasons. And maybe these are like PowerPoints. Again, you start getting really like new agey with it. But again, we've been out there, we've experienced this stuff. We've been able to capture some of it on our instrumentation and our cameras and all of that. So it's there. I mean, I thought the concept of a dogman was ridiculous up until we went to the LBL the first time.
Yeah, we went to the LBL kind of on a lark. We really didn't believe that dogman.
We were making jokes up until the day even driving there, we were making jokes about it. So.
Yeah, and we were kind of on the fence about going. We discussed going. All right, we might go. And then we just started receiving all of these reports from basically a column down the middle of North Carolina, starting in Blowing Rock and going all the way down to Kings Mountain. And it was just all these people getting in touch with us, and they're independent
and
of
they're
each
seeing
other.
werewolves,
but they're seeing werewolves, like each person. And it was all very quickly. It was like rapid fire. It was within a 2-week period. We received all of these reports directly about people seeing and experiencing upright canids, these werewolves. One lady had one that was coming around her house and urinating on her windows of her basements. And then we had a young girl that was on a run up in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and something stood up on 2 legs and started to chase her. Her father got in touch with us about that incident. And then we had a guy that got in touch with us that told us about this upright canid that chased his vehicle. He was with his friends in a vehicle. We went to that location and he took us to the spot where it happened. He described it. He's actually he's a preacher now. He's completely above reproach. He is a very honest and sincere man, and he absolutely saw what he saw, and he told us about this happening. So when this all started happening, Joe and I usually, when these coincidences start to pile up, we just go with where the universe is taking us. So we were like, let's do it. Let's go to the land between the lakes.
Because that figures very prominently in like the dogman mythos, basically.
Yeah.
Literally, we looked at each other and went, well, I guess we're investigating dogman right now. It's where the universe wants us to go to. But we're still making fun of it the whole time, because the idea of Sasquatch is one thing, but come on, man, an upright like werewolf is
werewolf.
still...
Well, here's the interesting aspect about the Bigfoot and the dog, right? So you have this ape, and then you have the dog, which is really interesting because I've called these like alchemical cryptids because right, you're talking about the ceremonial aspect of it. Well, I do think, right, chimeras are a thing. I do think that alchemically, I mean, there's stories of it. I talk about the homunculus all the time, right, which is an alchemically created being. Well, these alchemists were also writing about creating creatures that were chimeric in nature, whatever it is. And the ape is an interesting one because occultists, it was the animal of choice for magicians because it was a liminal species. It's a species, it's an animal that's not fully beast and it's not fully human. So therefore it exists in this in-between gray area. So therefore they use it for these occultic rituals. The dog is interesting in the occult because usually you have the devil associated with the dog, Mephistopheles, the dog, right, the black shaggy dog. You also have stories of tortured souls being reincarnated as dogs. So you have this weird connection with the dog, and then dog spelled backwards is God, right? So there's this connection with God as well. The dog star, all these different things. So I think what I think is happening when it comes to all these people collected, because it gets into the phenomenological approach where it's like, you can't tell these people otherwise. They saw what they saw. They experienced what they experienced. So it makes me think of Carl Jung, where he's talking about these alchemists, and they're like, wait a minute, these alchemists were transmuting reality. Maybe not perhaps on the physical level, but the psychological level. So you get into this realm of warping your own reality, and these people are experiencing these things. I've talked to people who've seen things before too, and it's like, you can't, hey, it's symbolic. You just saw Dogman symbolically. It's like, no, I saw what I saw. And the weird part about Dogman and Bigfoot is that whenever somebody sees Bigfoot, they want to go after another Bigfoot again. Like, I want to see Bigfoot. I want to hug him. I want to do whatever to him. And it's like when they see Dogman, they're like, I don't ever want to see that thing ever again. It's like almost like a demonic presence, like evil, versus like Bigfoot's like a big teddy bear or something. I don't know.
There are those Bigfoot encounters where people are just terrified. We've talked to people like that all the time. They're pretty traumatic. They're not all of them, but Dogman pretty much universally, you're right. They seem to bring forth like this feeling of like just existential dread, basically.
There's also instances of mind speak with Dogman. There's instances where people have said that they could hear the creature in their mind, and it's looking at them, but they could hear it in their mind saying that I could kill you right now if I wanted to.
I'm greater than you are. You're inferior to me on every manner. I could just snuff you at any moment that I wanted to. It's this implied threat the whole time. And people will be like, well, it's just a scare tactic. Nobody's ever really attacked by these things. And I'm going,
that you know of.
I mean, if people go missing all the time. And like I said, there might be cases of people being like, I think that a lot of this stuff, get like a warm fuzzy from hardly any of this stuff at all. I don't think it has humanity's best. If it's not flat out evil, it's so alien and indifferent to us at this point. You'd mentioned Cthulhu, like jokingly earlier, kind of like that. Like they're not necessarily, we're just insignificant. And if we get hurt along the way, we get hurt along the way.
And
But
the one case that really did it for me, and then when you start to see the pattern, because you said like no one's been attacked. Well, it's called the Cock County animal attacks, where if you start to look down that rabbit hole, it's like, wait a minute, everyone's kind of like so skittish about it, and there's all these animal attacks. Nobody knows what the animal is, but yet people are being attacked by these animals. And that's what solidified it for me of these dogmen encounters, where like, wait a minute, there's actual people being attacked by unidentified things.
And it's in the news one day and then it's just gone and you just don't hear about it again. And it seems like that would be like such a sensational thing, is this woman was eaten by a mysterious pack of dogs, or the Godsey case, wasn't it?
Yeah, Corey Godsey is a kid that was in
Cobb County, wasn't it?
No, he was in Knott County, Kentucky. And he was killed, and they tried to spin it as if it was done by feral dogs in the neighborhood.
After weeks of investigations,
the coroner was put under a gag order. He couldn't really talk. We've spoken to people that live in that area, and it's a very rural area. The kid was staying with relatives. It was, it's a very impoverished area. And some of the stuff that you heard coming out about this story was really weird, talking about how he was drug up the side of a mountain towards these caves, and that and again, this is secondhand information. I can't swear to it, but we heard it from more than one person. And they were talking about how the police showed up, state police, I guess, have jurisdiction over that area. There's no local police department. It's very sparsely populated. And that they said that people came in from this quote unquote, the state, some sort of like weird state animal control unit, and went up there and then brought down these like dead, sickly dogs, like these little mutts, basically going, it was a pack of wild dogs living in this cave system.
That drug him straight up the side of the mountain.
But it's okay. Everything's under control now, but we really don't want you guys to talk about it. We don't want to scare the public, and they're showing these 35-pound dogs that couldn't carry like a small boy like that up there. And we talked about before about the cave systems. Kentucky's riddled with caves. That's where Mammoth Cave is. And these things were supposedly coming out of like a cave or an abandoned mine shaft on the side of the mountain. Well, who knows how far that runs in there. And I could see maybe dogs taking, if it was a pack of wild feral dogs, taking shelter in like an overhang. They're not going to go and live in a cave system.
Or a mine shaft.
Or a mine shaft or anything like that. Maybe just in the, right in the entrance to stay out of the elements or whatever. But they were going, it's these pack of wild dogs but it's okay. We killed them all. It's okay now.
Kentucky is full of werewolf-esque lore. You've got the Beast of Albiel. You've got the Waddy Werewolf.
You've
Barilla.
Got the Gateway Werewolf. But it's weird. Like every little section has their own individual like werewolves.
But that's the only state that I know of that is just littered with werewolf-esque stories.
And that state also has an unusually high number of like quote-unquote mysterious animal attacks, where they start. And again, here's the deal. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, people would get bitten by dogs and stuff like that, but you didn't hear about people just basically being torn to shreds, not on a regular basis. But there's a lot of stories out there. People, there was a lady, teacher in North Carolina that supposedly got attacked by a pack of wild dogs and ripped on the side of the road on their morning jog. I don't remember stuff like that happening when I was a kid. Or maybe it just didn't make the news. I don't know. But nowadays, especially through Kentucky, you have like weird livestock attacks that are attacked by like, mysterious, like they say, stray dogs. Full-grown horses taken down. There was that guy who was breeding bulls that were, the cows and the bulls were taken down supposedly by dogs. But yet, usually, like if it's a pack of wild dogs, that's gonna be pretty easy to find, I would think, even in a countryside, you can find them. But it just seems like that area of Kentucky, it seems like I don't know if it is wild dogs, they got a real bad wild dog problem through there. And you would think that you would see them trying to do something to get that under control publicly, and you don't really see that. So,
yeah. And there's also, I'm trying to find here I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this story. Magdalena Solis, the high priestess of blood, or she was a leader of a cult. I'm trying to, I believe it was this one where they made this small village of people believe that they were gods incarnated. And
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I want to say there was like werewolves involved with that one inside the caves.
Yeah, it was like a couple of con men, wasn't it?
Yes.
Wasn't she like a prostitute that they had gotten, that basically they convinced all these rural villagers that they were basically gods, that they were the instruments of her, and she was like this divine deity. But the whole time they're a criminal organization, right? If I remember correctly.
Powerful exiled Inca gods.
Yeah, and they were using but then they started really getting into the occult and all of that. And there were like stories of werewolves on the outskirts of the village.
Yes.
And all that. Yeah. I'm not overly familiar with that story, but I remember hearing about it when it came out.
So I mean, that whole aspect of that, what'd you call them? You called them the wilderness therapy camps.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of the stuff just seems like it ties in together, and there's something that seems like it ties in, even if the creatures appear to be physical flesh and blood. They tie into consciousness and human belief as well. You know, you were talking about Jung, that idea of like a tulpa, like a mind construct, where basically the mind is given a thought physical form in the material world at that point. That's something that Jessi always talks about.
It gains strength as you give it more power.
Well, that's how much I think, like how much of this phenomenon is that all of us collectively, the 100 monkey theory, where 100 of us tap into it, and then how you said you keep feeding it and keep feeding it, it becomes this thing where it's literally just a projection of our subconscious collectively. But then the interesting part about the LBL is that you have Oak Ridge with their little collider that's there, and it's like, how much of it can you attribute it to that, where they're messing with stuff that they call science, or as I like to call it, seance, right? Because it's kind of sort of the same thing, the occult and quantum physics, right? Just a big word, but it's the same thing. It's these forces that they don't know what they are, how to harness them, and they're just clashing atoms together to see what happens. I mean, I call them cinemagicians, where they make movies of this, like the Spider-Man movies, where they open up, how you're talking about wormholes and portals earlier, they open up wormholes that suck things in. It's like, well, there's stories of people who are there just to guard from these portals they open up, and whatever comes out of it, they have to interact with it. And it's like, how much of it is that? And the idea of, I mean, the Montauk Project and all these different government involved projects where they obviously have an interest in this technology. And I remember fairly recently the super soldiers in, I think it was Ukraine, that there was these super soldiers. And I mean, that's Captain America, like all these different things. Like, is there I think there's a possibility for things like that, where the government, I mean, they came out a month ago talking about artificial embryos, where they don't even need a man or a woman anymore. They're artificially creating people. It's like, what are you trying to get at there? Like,
that's part of the whole deal. Is it's like the tulpa effect too. It's the revelation of the method. They're gonna show you what they're doing, and then once it's planted into the public's mind, then it can gain power. Because it might be a combination. Yeah. It might be a combination of this psychic energy being dedicated to it and feeding it, but also their production of it. It might be all these little puzzle pieces together, or all just little bricks in the wall that are bringing about whatever this is. It's part of the ritual of bringing these forces into our world.
Real quick little side note, when you had mentioned about just the belief and how the belief gets stronger, and then maybe, the physical manifestations of these creatures increase. In North Georgia, there's a Bigfoot museum. It's called Expedition Bigfoot, that opened up. And in that area, once the museum opened up and people started visiting, Bigfoot sightings skyrocketed. Just absolutely skyrocketed. And that was one of the things that Jessi and I talked about, as we were going, all right, if there's something to this tulpa idea, now you have people from all over the country that are coming through, they're congregating in one place, and Bigfoot is on their mind. They're talking about it driving there.
Allegedly, they have a Bigfoot turd there as well.
A little interesting bit of trivia. But that just possible, we were going, is it just the act of all of these people, the mental energy that they're putting forward about this topic, is it making these happen? And then to the point of like synthetic embryos, you were talking about, that's something that we've discussed before, that you've got synthetic life and you're big into the whole homunculus idea, is so if they have these synthetic embryos and these things become alive, well, where's that driving force? Where's that soul coming at? Are there, I always think that they're, obviously the universe is a lot weirder than what we think it is. And then when you get into the idea of other dimensions, and there's that running theme that it seems to be things outside of our dimension that want to get in. Well, here's a perfect opportunity for you at this point. Here's a vessel, it's able to move through the material world. It's got senses and feet and hands. There's just no soul there. Well, where's that going to come from at this point? If they bring some of these like synthetic embryos to fruition, if they put them in a synthetic womb and they basically pop out a synthetic baby, what's going to be the spiritual driving force of that? Where's that going to come from?
So it needs that spark.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, I mean, yeah, you get into the whole Frankenstein story. Even Crowley talked about the moon children, and his writing, he talks about secret organizations know about this technology. And it's like, wait, are you referring to the OTO? Or are you referring to the 3-letter agencies? Who are you talking about? Because recently, I think it was Greer, talked about how, because the phenomenon, and it's interesting how many people don't know about crop circles and how many people don't know about cow mutilations and how bizarre that phenomenon is. But Greer talked about how these alien greys, there's a sect of them that are actually government created man-made beings, and they're the ones responsible for all the cow mutilations and abductions. It's like, wait, so are they getting us ready for like a homunculus disclosure, like a soft, he's talking about like, hey, these things are actually, there's some real ones, but then there's some that are biologically made in the lab. It's like, okay. And then they just came out with, they cloned Tyrone, and they showed like entire cities are just clones. Like, what do they speak? Because they speak to the subconscious, and the subconscious is an important aspect when it comes to a lot of things. I mean, I've heard it that 80% of your choices that you make is made subconsciously, not like with your conscious mind. So it's like, what are they planting in that subconscious that they want to just leave it there? And like that tulpa, like Slender Man, like that was a tulpa, that was a thought form that made people do some heinous stuff. But it was just, again, this metaphysical, and that's what I think that literature and like all these books and all these things where they're portals to manifest things in. And we kept talking about Cthulhu. Well, H.P. Lovecraft was being given these ideas of the Cthulhu mythos through his dreams. So it's like, are there entities outside of space and time that want to manifest themselves any way they can? And hey, let's start off by just having a few books written about us, right? To go ahead and make an entire mythos.
There's parallels between what you always have to correct me on the name, Madame Blavatsky, who seemed like she gained all this knowledge from these like ascended elders. I always think of like H.P.
Lizard
Lovecraft,
men,
like you said, possibly in the exact same thing. A lot of this stuff came to him through his dreams. Was there maybe a source for that?
Elvis was interested in Blavatsky's writings, So you've got so many influential people who are huge cultural figures who are just putting this stuff out there. And that there's so much power behind the psychic ability and the power of the human mind, that the CIA was doing remote viewing experiments. They were doing psychokinetic experiments, and they were having successes. Colonel John Alexander has talked about, there were some successes, but it's not as successful or reliable as a bullet in warfare. But there are some successes. The fact that there's any successes at all when it comes to remote viewing or psychokinetic ability is huge. That's huge. So the CIA has dumped a lot of money and time and effort into exploring that. And I'm sure they've gleaned something out of that they can implant these thoughts, so they can implant these ideas, and they'll just simply grow, and then they'll build it by the collective unconscious.
And to veer back for a second, you'd mentioned something about the Greer idea that some of the alien greys are obviously creatures from somewhere else, and then some of them are maybe created by the government, for whatever reason. I always kind of have that same parallel with some of the other weird stuff that's out there, that like, Dogman, Sasquatch, anything like that some of it might be foreign entities from another reality, maybe some sort of crypto-terrestrial that's able to stay hidden here. Some of it might be the product of government experiments. We know that if a government, if our government got its hand on alien tech, it's going to try to, reverse engineer it for its own benefit.
They're saying they're doing that right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they were to perhaps get the remains of or come in possession of a creature with like abnormal abilities, they're going to try to make their own version of it. They're going to try to weaponize it. They're going to try to control it. So I always think that, some of this stuff that people report, Dogman, Sasquatch, some of it might be the core entity, and then some of it might very well be
the product of a black budget experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
Black budgets matter.
If they knew that stuff existed and they got their hands on samples, living or dead, they're going to try to replicate it. And they're going to try to control it for power at that point. So,
well, I remember growing up in Puerto Rico, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, hearing stories of my dad and his friends, my uncle and my aunt. They had something hit their back wall, right? So they had their house like lining. It was like a river or a creek, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And they had this wall. It was concrete wall, and something in the middle of the night swung and punched or hit the wall, and it left a crater, like a circle or crater. I also heard stories of my dad's friends staying up all night at their ranch because there was something sucking the blood dry from their livestock, and they would stay up with shotguns trying to find whatever was doing it. There was stories of these clawed hands coming in through the shut on the island. They have shutters, through the shutters and trying to grab people. I grew up with stories of the Chupacabra being this sort of alien government experiment gone wrong that got released into the Puerto Rican rainforest. And then when it got to over here, it turned into like this weird, stupid looking dog with like mange. And I was like, wait,
it's weird because in some circles there's been a lot of argument on that. What do they call the Texas one? The Texas terror dog or the Texas devil dog or something like that?
Terror dog.
Because it seems like it's one name for two completely dissimilar type of entities at that point.
The Puerto Rican one is kind of reptilian in a way.
Yes, right? It was an alien with spikes running down his back, big eyes, and then I remember seeing it over here, and they're like, "Oh, the Chupacabra strikes again." I'm like, that's not a Chupacabra. That's not a knife. This is a knife. Like there's the OG Chupacabra, but who knows if the collective conscious changed and morphed it into something else. You know what I'm saying? Like they changed it up and it became whatever everyone was being. Because the media is powerful, and I think that's something that they use to mold people's ideologies and consciousness too, to make them think whatever they want. So as of lately, again, we're in this community, it feels like there's a lot more dogmen encounters, or what everyone's calling dogmen. Because I've also heard the other side of the coin where people are like, no, this, that's what the hell they call it, the bear man or bear whatever. I don't know.
There's all sorts of names for it. Yeah.
Something else. But they were arguing about how sometimes it's ridiculous to just keep calling everything that you see a dogman. But it's like, again, when is that shift going to happen? Because it feels like I remember I read a book one time where I think God got pissed off when there was all these chimeras on Earth, and he sent like this storm and drowned everybody out. I don't know if that's going to happen again soon, because it feels like there's all these different things going on, and it feels like we're building up to some sort of climax. But I feel like we say that every few years, like, oh, this is going to be the year.
This is it. This is the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And it's weird. That's something we talk about a lot, is activity on the rise, or is it just
we're talking about
it more? I mean, it's.
You mentioned, I'll go back to your dogman thing, and then we'll go back to this. People are thinking about dogman a lot. People are talking about dogman a lot. It's really at the forefront of the cryptid conversation. You could have Sasquatch sightings from long ago that are just misidentified dogmen. That could be a possibility, that people have been seeing this thing for a long time, just misidentifying it, because the only thing that they can approximate it to is a Sasquatch, because it's a hairy creature on two legs.
Yeah.
But now there's a name for it, and there's kind of something going out into the public and into the wider knowledge about there being upright canids, dogmen. So there's a label you can put on this thing that people are seeing now.
But I think that because there's a distinction to be made between dogmen and werewolves, right? There's a distinction there. There's like.
Well, I think the metamorphosis, change.
The metamorphosis, but one of the things that you have to deal with is that when we get into these rural areas and we see it through the Carolinas, Georgia, especially through Kentucky, when I call it folklore, because people will go, hey, this property has been in my family for like 5 generations. We've been seeing them up here. they call them werewolves. The term dogman is really not that well known. It's getting better known right now. But if you see an upright canid or an upright wolf, you're going to think it's a werewolf, whether you saw it change or not. And that's what we mostly would have people report to us, that I saw. It's going to sound crazy, but I saw a werewolf. There's a werewolf trying to get in my house. There's a werewolf that comes down, tries to get into our livestock pens.
Because that's the closest cultural reference they've got.
And that's what they call it. So if you walk up to them and go, "Oh, have you had a dogman sighting?" They're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. To them, it's a werewolf because that's what it looks like at this point. But yeah, I mean, if you want to split the hairs with it, I guess the assumption would be that a dogman's always in that shape, and then a werewolf has some sort of transformation. That
I've heard one has a tail, the other one doesn't. It's like,
it's weird because when you start looking at the reports like that, there's a lot of variation in what people see. Some reports it looks almost just like a Sasquatch with like a wolf head. Some reports it looks like just like a timber wolf that just happens to be on its hind legs. Sometimes it looks like a Nubis.
Well, you said a Sasquatch with a dog's head, you said?
Sometimes you see them and they have people report them that they have regular legs, they have regular feet, but just with claws.
And the proportions are what you would expect from a Sasquatch sighting.
But it just happens to have a wolf-like head to it at that point. So we found a print in the LBL, in the Land Between the Lakes, that it's not a human footprint. It doesn't appear to be a Sasquatch footprint because everybody's seen those online and we've found those before. It's not a regular canine print. It looks like a human-like footprint, very deep in the ground, but with claws coming out of the toes.
I was breaking in my new Vibrams. I'm sorry, bro. I didn't mean to.
But it's, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, all right, if some of those accounts are to be believed, this is what I would expect a clawed,
upright bipedal,
to look like at this point. So.
And it's funny because I've gone hunting for boar here, right? And if there were to be something, I think it would be in Florida because the population of boar would be able to sustain. And I've also heard, I think, accounts of Florida dogmen too, if I'm not mistaken, over on the West Coast. And I remember I got taken to this spot, my buddy that he maintains them for hogs, and we're up on the tree stand and we start talking about, right, it's probably 11 or 12 o'clock at night and it's pitch black and we're just waiting around by the feeder for these hogs to come through. And we have not a night vision. We had not a thermo, night vision. And I asked my buddy, I was like, hey dude, what if you were to turn on this scope and there was something staring back at you? Like just something whatever. Yeah. Right. And he's like, well, it's funny you say that because in this area, there was, I believe it was a Class A sighting off of I-95. I was over by Grant Valkyrie, Florida, in that area over there. And he said it was like 5 aerial miles from where we were at, there was a Sasquatch sighting. And I looked over him and I go, dude, you brought me to or skunk ape sighting, right? I was like, you brought me to where there was a skunk ape sighting. He's like, listen, dude, if I'm scared of anything out here, it's people. He's like, I had one time this guy show up barefoot, no shirt, just had pants on, a shotgun in one hand, walking through. He stopped in front of the trail cam, gave me a thumbs up, and then he was gone the next frame. He's like, I'm scared of those people. And what these people from the wilderness therapy camps that come out, I was like, hey, I want to show you about my Lord and Savior Cthulhu.
We had some of those people from the wilderness therapy camp follow us. One time we were hiking up, and like when we were out in the woods, we're doing this. We've got cameras, we got camera equipment, we got a camera on a tripod. We're hiking, we got our backpacks on because we hike out, we take everything with us, all of our research materials, all of our stuff to film everything, record everything. So we were hiking up and we figured out where they were because they were actually out there when we were out there. We could see kind of their little, because they had the kids sleeping under tarps deep in the woods, and we were out there and we were kind of trying to get kind of away from them because we didn't know if they had people watching or what was going on. I did photograph them a little bit. I got a little bit of footage of the tarps and everything. And then we're headed up the mountain, and these guys just come right up behind us. They didn't have packs. They didn't have anything. and they're just smiling at us. And they're like, "What are you guys up to?" And we're like, "Oh, we have a YouTube channel where we do hiking videos. We're just hiking out in the woods, you know, because we had cameras."
You guys carry too, right? By the way.
We're armed every time we go.
Yeah, we both carry every time we're out in the woods. But they're just kind of like, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, you guys have a great day." And it's like they didn't have anything with them, so they're not hikers. But they just came right up to just, I guess, see what we were up to. But yeah, it's that human element's real weird because they were real, real overly, nice.
Yeah, very, very it's like Stepford Wives type behavior, just real wide eyed and overly
smiley face killer type vibes, or it's
exactly. But there was that, and that's another thing that I people go missing out in the woods all the time, and being out in the wilderness, it's unforgiving in certain areas. I mean, even in the Southeast, we don't have those wide expanses of wilderness like you see in the Pacific Northwest or in Canada and Alaska, but we've got some pretty big wild areas down here, and people go missing, fairly frequently. And I'm like, a lot of this is due to human activity, man. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're somebody who, whether it's somebody acting on an individual basis, like a serial killer, or the smiley face killer thing just fascinates me, because if you look into that, there's something going on.
It's like occultic, but also there's something else. There's a wilderness therapy camps situation going on as well. It's like a gang stalking, weird connection. Yeah.
And it's weird. And when you start to find all of those deaths associated with water, those young men going missing out of the bars and everything like that, they're not seen on the security
One guy
camera
was
leaving.
a champion swimmer, and they said he drowned.
But they're found in the water, but they didn't drown. And a lot of times they can't determine a cause of death, but they have high levels of drugs like rohypnol in their system and all that. Yeah, there's something going to for that. I mean, but you get into these areas like this, I think there's activity like that goes on. But then you mentioned that shirtless guy with the shotgun. Feral people is
Florida man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a lot of these. It's weird because right now the Southeast, this part of the country, is being developed at a really quick rate. Yes. So there's communities pushing into some of these areas that have been pretty remote for a long time. Well, you've got families that live up in some of these hollers that they don't really come out. The kids don't go to school. They don't have social security number or anything like that. They were delivered in the home and they live there, and they might come into a more populated area for supplies occasionally, but they're as feral as you can get in 21st century America. And what is that movie, Wrong Turn? I mean, there's some wrong turn.
There's entire, I forgot where it was. There was the incest filled family up in the, I think it was Wisconsin or something, up in the mountains somewhere. There's a whole thing about that. I've seen that before, where it's these.
There's that family in West Virginia, in Odd, West Virginia is the town, but they're all inbred. That photographer did a whole series on them. But yeah, there's more than just them out there.
Well, I had to look up the name because I can never remember, but Shawnee Bean was in 16th century Scotland. He had a 45 or 50 person family that they were just insulated, lots of incest going on, and they were just eating travelers. And this went on, they had to call in the army, to actually come in and finally just burn them out at that point. Yeah. Now that's 16th century Scotland. But here's the deal. Some of these areas, especially through, the Appalachians and all that, they're hard to get into.
Yeah.
And there's really, a lot of times, there's no reason to go there. There's no hiking trails. There's no camping. There's nothing scenic, there. Mm-hmm. And there's people that have gone into those hills and they just stay. I mean, we'll go out through the national forests and stuff through here. And we'll go out and we'll come across what appears to be the remnants of an old road. You can just tell where it had been leveled. Trees have grown up on it now, but you can tell it used to be a road once upon a time. And you go back in and you kind of follow it, and we come across, the ruins of an old family settlement or anything like that.
Yeah, we find settlements out there all the time. I know you mentioned before talking about the stairs in the woods that go nowhere.
Stairs
and
nowhere,
all that.
Yeah.
There were settlements out all throughout these woods. We've found spots like that all throughout the woods. We'll find chimneys, we'll find foundations, we'll find some stone stairs. That's because people lived all throughout these woods. And when they established the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, they had to get everybody off of that land. That's exactly what happened in the land between the lakes is they established these parks, they kick everybody off the land, but there were people that were living there for generations and generations.
And some of them didn't leave.
Yeah,
and some of them are still there now.
In the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, there is a swath of wilderness that is one of the widest, largest swaths of wilderness that is uninhabited in the country, and nobody can access it. Really, you cannot access it without helicopter and it's very, very rugged terrain. It's very rough.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge just a section out there that is just unexplored. Nobody goes out there, and there's no telling what's going on in these areas.
No, I think about that too, because I frequent the Everglades, and the Everglades to me, it's like a magical place, and there's people who live out there in the Everglades. I mean, there's people who you can go on Google Earth and zoom in, and there's people who travel around with just an airboat, and they live out there, and it's like that would be wild. And I always think about that. When I went to Gatlinburg recently, I went over to, what's that cove? What's it called? The Cades Cove. And then I come to find out there's like some lore with that place. And can you imagine, because I think about this, I've dug into Florida history extensively, and like the robber barons that really pushed Florida was the last frontier, quite literally. And I think about what these settlers were experiencing back then. Can you imagine like a early 1900s Florida, just wilderness, just the vegetation? They have sawgrass that just cuts you whenever you just walk by. There's alligators everywhere. There's snakes everywhere. Or even in that Cades Cove, where it's a beautiful place. Can you imagine when they first pulled up? Then they're like, "This is where we want to put our cabins." And this is it's like, it feels magical when you're out there. Really, I mean, it really does. It's super beautiful. So it's like these open areas that kind of call you in, but then they're area. They say that the desert is the devil's mansion. Well, the jinn live in the desert, and all these entities live in the desert. So I feel like there's something strange, the energy about these open areas. And then Florida, that's next to one of the 12-mile vortices, the Bermuda Triangle. So you have that weirdness there. So again, I don't know. But yeah, I always think about what these settlers were experiencing when they would first come out here and just...
Well, I think they experienced... I mean, if you look at... In our area, it's the Cherokee and the Catawba, the Native American tribes that were through here. And there's a particular area, and it's where we saw that light at. It's where we ran into that wilderness therapy camp at. Well, there's stories going back to the Cherokee of stuff that they experienced. Well, then there's folklore from like the European settlers when they came into this area that are basically reporting the same damn thing. There's one area up there where they're hearing these mysterious booms, and we actually caught them on camera one night. These booms that have been reported up there for generations, man. It's not mining. This was taking place, the natives were reporting this thing long before like Europeans landed on the shore. But the Native Americans thought that the gods would gather on this mountain to play stickball, and then they were chased off by those fire-breathing demons that Jessi mentioned earlier. And this was the sound of like combat going on. And then the European settlers landed, and they started hearing it, and they thought it was ghostly cannon fire. They thought the battle must have been fought there, and these were the cannons of the ghosts. And now people just explain them away, going, "Oh, somebody's setting off fireworks," or they're dynamiting a mine.
But we did get good audio of those. Yeah. I think we got 3 instances of it on that video, but you can hear it, and it just sounds like somebody's taking like a shipping container and raising it 60 feet in the air and then dropping it on
very percussive thud. But that's what they experience. So I think that a lot of the folklore that's been passed down it's not just stories that were made up around a campfire. I think it's experiences that a lot of these people had when they showed up in these areas. You go into that area again, like, Cades Cove, or, these spots in North Georgia, or, Kentucky, when that was starting to be settled. And it's areas that have just this natural, weird energy. And it's spooky enough for us with, cell phone technology and just, all the modern trappings that we have. Well, now think that you've just got like, you've got a wagon. I was
going to say it's spooky for us if we've got Glock 20s.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you've got like a one-shot muzzleloader rifle, your wife and your kids and a couple of oxen and a wagon at this point. And that's all you've got, and you've been in those areas. They get dark at night, man. I mean, it's unearthly how it's like you're literally in another world at this point. Well, imagine that it's like that. And instead of it being 50 miles of that, it's hundreds and hundreds of miles like that. And so I think that, a lot of the Native American tribes and then the follow-on like European colonists, I think they experienced a lot of the same stuff that people are reporting today at this point. So,
yeah, I don't think it helps, because I have this theory that we're all there's this other dimension called the Mundus Imaginalis related to Carl Jung, and how I think we're all collectively scrying with our technology into that dimension and bringing things in. Just how
you're talking my language now. I've got this big thing about AI. How about AI might eventually be subverted by interdimensional intelligence? You know what I'm saying? That, are posing as AI, and the whole scrying thing that you talked about with like technology. You look at things that are in the keys of Solomon. You look at some of that stuff, and then you look at how circuits are laid out. They damn near look like the same thing. You're taking a prescribed symbol, and then you're channeling energy through it, and then you're getting the required. And that's the thing that really fascinates both of us, is that how a lot of this modern stuff, it's basically just riffs on, look at CE5. You mentioned Stephen Greer earlier, CE5, you take people out into a secluded area, they enter a meditative state, they go through prescribed motions, and then these UFOs appear. If this was happening in the 15th century, they'd burn you at the stake as a witch, because it sounds like sorcery. You're doing
what we're doing right now. They'd burn us at the stake.
Summoning rituals.
Yeah, it's a summoning ritual, and entities are showing up at that point. So
yeah, they'd kill us too. They'd burn us at the stake for doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So what is, to bring this to a close, I really enjoyed talking to y'all. What's next? What are you guys planning as far? Do you guys have any big expeditions, or, because I know you guys do like documentary style videos. You guys planning anything special coming up here soon?
We do. Yeah. All of our videos are documentary style. It's just Joe and I going out in the woods. We film ourselves, and I've been putting videos out weekly at this point, pretty regularly. I've been putting, because we go out in the woods all the time. We're just out there every week, just hitting the trails. And so I've been putting videos out on a weekly basis right now. I'm speaking at a convention in Montgomery Bell State Park in Tennessee, October 14th and 15th. Ron Moorhead is actually speaking at that convention too. He's famous for the Sierra Sounds and for the Quantum Bigfoot. But I'll be doing that October 14th and 15th. What else do we have coming up?
We're going to be back in the LBL doing some investigations. We're real tech heavy, so we've got some cool experimental type stuff that we're working on. I think if there's anything that we're good at, it's kind of that outside of the box thinking and trying to like approach the topic in like kind of a creative and novel manner. So we've got, we talked about portals earlier. One of the kicks we're on right now is there a way to possibly triangulate that energy, track it down to the source at that point.
Figure out where it's coming
So
from.
we're running around the woods with, I'm looking at it right now, telescopic, tripods that go up 16, 18 feet with directional antennas on there. That's something that we're experimenting with right now, and that might pay dividends. We'll see. So.
I'm also kind of experimenting with something that's similar to CE5, but with Sasquatch, sort of like a Sasquatch summoning experiment. So we're really into super science and sorcery here.
Yeah, we got that Thundar mix. So,
Stacy Brown Jr. there. He's the skunk ape experiments. So he's a friend of the show, and I'm gonna be working on something with him here soon, hopefully. So we'll see what happens.
That's cool.
So can you guys play your stuff real quick for those where they can find you, your website, YouTube?
Absolutely. So you can do youtube.com/Hellbent Holler. We do a live stream every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That's where we kind of interact and hang out with our viewers. We call them the Hellbenders, and it is probably one of the best live chats and live streams that are in the field. We have electrical engineers.
It's not the normal cryptid type hangout type thing. Yeah, we have theoretical physicists, professors of divinity. We have electrical engineers.
Wilderness therapy counselors, right?
They're probably there, like
they're watching, they're monitoring
hidden, but
we do that every Monday at 7:30, and that's about 2 hours long. But it's really a really great interactive conversation that we do every week. And I've been releasing videos pretty much weekly at this point of our expeditions out in the woods, and we use all of our equipment, and you can see kind of our process through. We do everything, and we get results. We try to be results driven. We go out there, we're always out there, and we have the technology to actually capture the phenomenon. So I think that's why we've been getting the results we've gotten. That's why we've gotten the evidence that we've gotten, is we have the technology and we have the time out in the woods doing it. So, but you can check us out on YouTube, Hellbent Holler. You can find me on Instagram at Hellbent Jessi, and our website is hellbentholler.com. Yeah, we just go full speed into this, and it's pretty much our lives at this point. But yeah, that's about it.
Do you guys have an RSS feed set up yet?
I think so. We don't really put out we were doing a podcast. We did a podcast last summer called Dark Dive. And because we used to take the summers off because it's so hot and really difficult to hike and carry all of our equipment through the woods. So we did all these podcast episodes last summer. We might pick Dark Dive back up again.
Yeah, we were going to take the summer off like we normally do, but the amount of like activity
out in the woods
in this area right now is like insane. I mean, we're getting like emails every day. So we were kind of like, we've got that fear of missing out right now. I'm just going, all right, you know, we're not taking the summer off, obviously. So, you know, I mean, we'll be out for the next 4 days. When we finish this up tonight, we're going to start packing and get all geared up, and we'll be leaving out tomorrow, and we'll be out in the field for 4 days right now. And it's supposed to be just brutally hot for the next 4 days. So,
well, I wish y'all the best. Stay safe. Try not to conjure anything up, and protect yourselves. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again here soon. I really enjoyed this, y'all. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dial it back like a rotary telephone. The darkness becoming a fair.